Chapter 2, I Wish. You have to admit he's good looking, Bree pressed, leaning against my kitchen counter. Of course I admit it. I'm not blind, I said, busily opening cans. It was my night to make the dinner. The washed cut-up chicken was sitting naked in a Pyrex dish. I dumped out a can of cream of artichoke soup, a can of cream of celery soup, and a jar of marinated artichoke hearts. Voila! Dinner. But he seems like kind of a player, I continued mildly. I mean, how many people has he gone out with in the last 2 weeks? 3, said Tamara Pritchett, unfolding her long skinny frame onto the bench in our breakfast nook. It was Monday afternoon, the beginning of the 3rd week of school. I could safely say that Cal Blair's arrival in the sleepy town of Widow's Vale was the most exciting thing that had happened since the Millhouse Theater burned to the ground 2 years ago. Morgan, what is that? Chicken Morgan, I said. Delicious and nutritious. I reached into the fridge for a Diet Coke and popped the top. Ah. Toss me one of those, Robbie said. And I got one. How come when a guy dates a lot, he's a player, but if a girl does, she's just picky? That is so not true, Bree protested. Hello, girls, and Robbie, my dad said, wandering into the kitchen, his brown eyes somewhat vague between his glasses. He was wearing his usual uniform, khaki pants and a button-down shirt, short sleeve because of the weather, and a white t-shirt underneath it. In the winter, he wears the same thing, except with the long-sleeve shirt and a knit sweater vest over it all. Hey, Mr. R., Robbie said. Hi, Mr. Rollins, Tamara said, and Bree waved. Dad glanced around distractedly, as if to make sure that this really was his kitchen. With a smile at us, he wandered out again. Bree and I shared a grin. We knew that soon he'd remember what he'd come in to get, and he'd return for it. He works in research and development at IBM, and they think he's a genius. Around our house, he's more like a slow kindergartner. Can't keep his shoes tied, and he has no concept of time. I stirred the mixture in the glass pan and covered it with foil. Then I grabbed 4 potatoes, scrubbed them in the sink. I'm glad my mom cooks, Tamara said. Anyway, Cal has gone out with Susan Herbert, Raven Meltzer, and Janice. She ticked off the names on her fingers. Janice Uto? I squealed, putting the dish in the oven. She didn't even tell me about it. I frowned. Added the potatoes. God, he sure doesn't have a type, does he? It's like from column A, one from column B, and one from column C. That dog, said Robbie, pushing his glasses up on his nose. Robbie was such a close friend I hardly noticed it anymore, but he had terrible acne. He had been super cute until 7th grade, which made it all the harder on him. Bree wrinkled her forehead. The Janice Uto thing I can't figure out, unless she was helping him with his homework. Janice is actually really pretty, I said. She's just so shy. You don't notice it. I can't figure out Susan Herbert. Bree almost choked. Susan is gorgeous. She modeled for Hawaiian Tropic last year. I smiled at Bree. She looks like Malibu Barbie, and she's got the brain to match. I ducked as Bree tossed a grape at me. Not everyone can be a National Merit Scholar, she said, snippily. She paused and then said, I guess none of us are wondering about Raven. She goes through guys like Kleenex. Oh, and you don't? I teased her, and was rewarded by another grape bouncing off my arm. Hey, Chris and I have been together for almost 3 months now, Bree said. And? Robbie prompted her. Self-righteousness mixed with rueful embarrassment crossed Bree's face. He's bugging me a little, she admitted. Tam and I laughed, and Robbie snorted. I guess you're just picky, Robbie said. My dad wandered into the kitchen again and got a pen from the pen jar and headed out again. Okay, Bree said, opening the back door. I better get home before Chris freaks out. She made a face. Where have you been? She said in deep-voiced imitation. She rolled her eyes and left. Moments later, we heard her temperamental BMW Breezy take off and chug down the street. Poor Chris, Tamara said. Her curly brown hair was escaping from her headband, and she expertly twisted it back underneath. I think his days are outnumbered, Robbie said, taking a sip of soda. I pulled out a bag of salad and ripped it open with my teeth. Well, he lasted longer than usual. Tam nodded. It might be a record. The back door flew open and my mother staggered in, her arms full of files, flyers, and real estate signs. Her jacket was wrinkled and it had a coffee stain on one pocket. I grabbed the stuff from her hands and set it on the table. Mary, Mother of God, my mother muttered. What a day. Hi, Tamara, honey. Hi. Hey, Robbie. How have you two been? How's school so far? Fine. Thanks, Mrs. Rollins, Robbie said. How about you? Tamara asked. You look like you've been working hard. You could say that, my mom said with a sigh. She hung her jacket on a hook by the door and headed to the cabinet to fix herself a whiskey sour from the mix. Well, we better head out, Tamara announced, picking up her backpack. She kicked Robbie's sneaker gently. Come on, I'll give you a ride. Nice seeing you, Mrs. Rollins. See you later, Robbie said. Bye, guys, my mom said, and the back door closed behind them. Gosh, Robbie's getting tall. He's really growing into himself. She came over to give me a hug. Hi, sweetheart. Smells great in here. Is it Chicken Morgan? Yep, with baked potatoes and frozen peas. Sounds perfect. She drank from her glass, which smelled sweet and citrusy. Tiny sip, I asked. No, ma'am, Mom replied, as she always did. Let me change and I'll set the table. Is Mary Kay here? I nodded. Upstairs was some of the Mary Kay fan club. Mom found boys or girls? I think both. Mom nodded, headed upstairs, and I knew that the boys at least were about to get the boot. Hi, can I sit here? Janice asked at lunch period the next day, pointing to an empty spot in the grass of the school's courtyard next to Tamara. Of course, Tamara said, waving a handful of Fritos. We'll be even more multicultural. Tamara was one of the very few African Americans in our overwhelmingly white school, and she wasn't afraid to joke about it, particularly with Janice, who was somewhat self-conscious about being the one of the very few Asians. Janet sat cross-legged with her tray balanced on her lap. Excuse me, I said pointedly. Is there any interesting news you'd like to share? Confusion crossed Janice's face as she chewed the school's version of meatloaf and swallowed. What? You mean from class? No, I said impatiently. Romantic news? I raised my eyebrows. Janice's pretty face turned pink. Oh, you mean Cal. Of course I mean Cal, I practically exploded. Can't believe you didn't say anything. Janice shrugged. We just went out once, she said, last weekend. Tamara and I waited. Can you embellish, please? I pressed after a minute. I mean, we're your friends. You went out with the single best-looking guy on the planet. We deserve to know. Janice looked pleased and embarrassed. It didn't really seem like a date, she said finally. It's more like he's trying to get to know people, know the area. We drove around and talked a lot. He wanted to know all about the town and the people. Tamara and I looked at each other. I said finally. So you're not hooking up or anything? Tamara rolled her eyes. Be blunt, why don't you, Morgan? Janice laughed. It's fine, she said. And no. No hooking up, I think we're just friends. I said again. He is friendly, isn't he? Speak of the devil, Tamara said softly. I looked up to see Cal ambling towards us, his lips curved in a smile. Hey, he said, crouching on the grass next to us. Am I interrupting anything? I shook my head and drank my soda in an attempt to look casual. Are you getting settled in? Tamara asked. Widow's Vale is pretty small, so it probably won't take you long to figure out where everything is. Cal smiled at her, and I blinked at his supernatural face. By now I expected to have this reaction when I was around him, so it didn't bother me much. Yeah, it's pretty here, Cal said. Full of history, I feel like I've gone back in time. He looked down at a patch of grass, absently stroking a blade between his fingers. I tried not to stare, but I found myself wanting to touch what he touched. I came over to ask if you guys would come to a party this Saturday night, Cal said. We were all so surprised that we didn't say anything for a second. It seemed gutsy for a relative stranger to throw a party so soon. Roland's, Bree called from across the lawn. Then came and sank down gracefully on the grass next to me. She gave Cal a beautiful smile. Hi, Cal. Hey, I've been going around inviting people to a party this Saturday, Cal said. A party? Bree looked like this was the best idea she'd ever heard. What kind of party? Where? Who's coming? Cal laughed, leaning back his head so I could see the strong column of his throat with its smooth tan skin. In the V of his shirt hung a warm leather string with a silver pendant dangling from it. A 5-pointed star, surrounded by a circle. I wonder what the symbol meant. If the weather's all right, it will be an outdoor party, Cal said. Mostly, I just want to have a chance to talk to people. You know, not at school. I'm asking most of the juniors and seniors. Really? Bree's lovely brows arched. Sure. The more the merrier. I figured we could meet up outside. The weather's been beautiful lately, and there's this field at the edge of the town over past Towers Market. I thought we could sit around and talk and look at the stars. We all stared at him. Kids hung out at the mall, kids hung out at the movie theater, kids even hung out at the 7-Eleven when things got really slow. But nobody ever hung out in the middle of an empty field out past Towers Market. This isn't the kind of thing you usually do, is it? He asked. Not really, Bree said carefully. But it sounds great. Okay, well, I'll print up some directions, hope you guys can come, he said smoothly, gracefully, the way an animal rises. I wish you were mine. I was shocked that my brain had formed that thought. I'd never felt that way about anyone, and Cal Blair was so out of my league that wanting him seemed stupid, almost pathetic. I shook my head. This was pointless. I would just have to snap out of it. When he was gone, my friends turned to one another excitedly. What kind of party is this? Tamara wondered out loud. I wonder if there will be a keg or something, Bree said. I think I'm going out of town this weekend, Janice said. Looking half disappointed, half relieved, the four of us watched as Cal approached Bree's other friends, who were hanging out on the benches at the edge of the school grounds. After talking to them, he headed to the stoners clustered by the doors to the cafeteria. The funny thing was, he looked like each crowd he spoke to. When he was with the brains like me and Tamara and Janice, he was totally believable as a gorgeous, brilliant, deeply inquisitive scholar type. When he was with Bree's friends, he looked cool, casual, hip, a trendsetter. And when he was standing next to Raven and Chip, I could totally imagine him as a stoner smoking pot every day after school. It was amazing how comfortable he was with everyone. On one level, I envied it since I'm comfortable with only a small group of people, my good friends. In fact, my two closest friends, Bree and Robbie, I've known since we were babies and our families lived on the same block. That was before Bree's family moved into a huge modern house with a view of the river, long before we'd split up into different cliques. Bree and I were two of the only people at our school who managed to be close despite belonging to different groups. Cal was universal, in a way. And even though I was nervous, I wanted to go to that party.